Today, I'm going to paint a pumpkin using very simple colors and acrylic paint. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button and support this public school teacher's side hustle with my free art tutorials and lessons. Find me on Instagram and TikTok at thatartteacher_Machado. I will link all of my materials in the description box, but I am using a basic set of paint, a basic set of Amazon paintbrushes, and a teeny tiny little canvas, and I'm using very similar colors, so red, orange, and pink. Make sure you're using colors that you can blend and mix on the palette. If you do complementary colors, for example, you're mixing wet on wet, so that will make a brown. So be very aware of the color scheme you choose if you're not going to be using these colors exactly. You can also wash your brush each time or use a separate brush for each color, depending on how much you want the colors to mix on the canvas or you want them to have their own distinct voice. You can see that the pink I'm overlapping here, and I'm going to go back to my orange and kind of give it its moment down at the bottom. Oh, at the top too. As you paint, think about a fun texture, and because your colors are going to be so similar, you can really blend and mix and create a nice dynamic textured background that will be very similar from a distance, but also it just won't be a flat, solid color. I always like to start with my background first. Students have such a hard time making a background. So this wet on wet technique, you do your background first and then you directly paint your subject matter on top of it. I'm using white paint to create my pumpkin. And you can see, although it's white paint, it's blending wet on wet in the background. And so it's creating this beautiful warm pumpkin with all these like pinks, oranges, and reds that are shining through. I'm using a flat brush because I like how it creates a smooth section. And I suggest looking at a pumpkin in real life or Google it and find a pumpkin that you really like the shape. There's so many different styles and types of pumpkins. I really also enjoy creating this section in the back that looks 3D. I will put the stem there to kind of make it make sense. And you can make your pumpkin more white, or you can let the background shine through a little bit more. I'm going to add a second layer of white here, really trying to make sure each section has its own individual voice, using that same brush to kind of pull some of the paint that's still on there. And again, if you've never painted before, you might notice, oh my gosh, she didn't use a pencil to draw out your pumpkin. And I highly recommend, if you're really trying to paint, give up the whole concept of mapping things out with a pencil. I'm not saying there's not a time and place for sketching, but think of the paintbrush as your pencil, and acrylic paint is so wonderful because you can layer. So if you make a mistake, instead of erasing it or staying in a pencil line, just adapt by layering your paint. I'm going to go ahead and add some textured areas here, layering my white paint. And this painting, I'm actually going to do it all in one session. I'm not going to let anything dry. It's going to be a true wet on wet painting. My canvas is very small, so it was easy for me to do this quickly. If you're working larger, keep in mind it might take longer for you to paint certain areas, so the dry time will be different, and every painting is different. You might not like what you do the first time, so you might let it dry and then go ahead and add white paint again. It really just depends on what your goals are and your experience. Going back in here, getting those sections nice and defined without losing the beautiful background colors that are echoing through my pumpkin. I really love how the background is working with the subject itself. So many young artists have a hard time. They might know exactly what they want to paint, but they don't know what to do with your background. So practicing observational painting, where you're looking at an object and putting it in a space like this, really helps you develop a background without it just being like one flat color. I'm going to add my stem here with my round brush, and definitely look at different types of stems. They're so much fun. And notice I'm not using brown. I'm not using green for a leaf or anything like that. We're going to keep this very simple. It's almost monochromatic. I mean, the red, orange, and pink are distinct colors, but because they're so similar and I'm using white, it almost becomes a monochromatic painting. And I'm looking here, just thinking highlights. Which area do I want to look like it's sticking forward? Which area do I want to look like it's the most 3D? And I'm not really even thinking light source so much. I'm not thinking that there's like a light shining specifically on it, just that it's a pumpkin sitting in a natural environment where the light would hit basically the areas that are the most bulbous, the most 3D, the areas that stick out the most. And I'm applying a layer of paint here. Using my brush, not smooth to pull, but I'm kind of dabbing the brush in there so that the white paint doesn't blend into the second or that first layer, but it kind of sits on top. I'm going to go back here and do a little bit of touch-ups with the background colors so the edges of the pumpkin really look like they're separate from the background. So it looks like it's sitting somewhere pink, right? But also I want the edges to be nice and clean. Gonna go back in, and now that the paint's a little bit dry in the background, that area you could see the canvas through the pink paint just a little bit. So I'm taking one of my larger flat brushes and I'm just gonna add a second layer. The paint dries really fast, so it's not 100% dry. If you touch it, it would still be tacky to the touch, but you can see that it does with the second layer make it a little bit darker and a little bit more opaque. And so I'm just letting that pink kind of be a little bit darker and blend into the orange. Speaking of orange, I'm going to go back with a different brush or a clean brush. And I'm going to do the same thing to the top of the painting, making sure that orange is nice and opaque, letting it blend naturally into the pink. And while I have some on my brush, let me put some more of that into the stems so it looks more different than the pumpkin itself, and that background's kind of echoing in there. Looking at a stem as I do it to make sure that it has that nice texture, has that nice kind of line work in it. Using my pink as well, just small little touch-ups. I feel like I'm almost done here. Looking at the bottom again. And you can kind of go back and forth with white and the colors of the background to make sure that you're happy with, you know, how white the pumpkin is versus how orange or pink. You could go darker, you could go lighter. And this is such an easy subject matter. I feel like this would be a really fun thing to do multiple views of. As you can see, I have done lots of pumpkins on my YouTube channel, so I will link those in my description box of other styles of pumpkins, other color schemes you can use, because it really is a great subject matter, especially if you're new or a beginner. It's just recognizable, it's so fun, it's easy to make look 3D, and I think she's done. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me, and if you're interested in more painting tutorials, check these out. Find my website, thatartteacher.com. I have full-length lesson plans, student examples for artists making art at home or for a classroom teacher.